So my name is Father Rob Adams. I'm 29 years old, and I believe I'm the youngest priest in this part of Kentucky, at least. Maybe somebody's younger up near Cincinnati, I don't know. But at least in this part of Kentucky, from here to Frankfort, I'm the youngest guy.
And what does it mean? Help us who are not in the Catholic world. Give me just a couple things about what it means to be a priest.
Yeah, so being a priest is, it's a little bit different than just being a preacher. So we definitely preach. We got this big church here. But being a priest is also about, in the Catholic mind, being a priest is standing in the place of Jesus Christ, standing in his shoes and acting as him. And not just in the sense that every good person is like Jesus when they, feed the hungry and they pray and love God. But as a priest, you're claiming to actually be Jesus in a moment, to act with his word, to speak with his words and to act with his power. So that is very difficult, and it's a bit beyond me. So I think it's cool. It's one of the things that keeps you humble and reminds you that no matter how good you are at speaking or how nice you are, how many people like you, that you're still not him, and that's what we're called to be.
When you say standing in the place of Christ as a priest, one, you go, wow, right?
Mm-hmm.
But number two, I think, man, I wonder what Rob was like as a kid. Did he say, I want to always stand in the place of Jesus and be a priest? What was it that you wanted to do as a kid?
Man, when I was a kid, I don't know if they still do it, but when I was in school, they gave us those little aptitude tests where they were trying to see what you're good at, what you should, consider doing or whatever. I was the class debater in school. I was the one the teacher would say something and I was like, nah, that's not true. So my aptitude test said that I should either be a politician or a teacher. And I found this really interesting because when I was in school, I founded our little communist party in middle school. And we had little red flags and everything. It's funny, I'm not a communist anymore, but I didn't think priesthood or any sort of religious life was in the cards. I didn't particularly care about church as a kid, because for me it was like, church is a bunch of rules, and we can be nice without church. We can feed the hungry and be nice to people and build houses, and you don't need to go to church to do that. And in fact, if you're a communist, you can probably do it a little bit better. And what sort of changed that whole thing for me was just relationships. Like I met a young guy who was studying to be a priest, and I'd never met anyone like that. And I thought that he would be like a super Jesus person, like hallelujah. But this guy read the same comics I did, we played the same video games, he was a nerd kind of like I was, and I was like, this is a Jesus person who is not a Jesus person. And moreover, he seems very happy about this. He seems like he's found his fit, like that's his hole, that's what he's meant to be. And that kind of got me thinking. I was like, well, I guess being a Jesus person is not off the table for me. That's something I could try. And he seems happy, and I would like to be happy, so I will try this. And that was what kind of brought me into my faith. And being brought into my faith, I was like, well, naturally, if this is what brought me to faith, I got to be like that guy. And he went on to be a priest. He's now the pastor in Winchester at the Catholic Church there. And I felt that encounter with Christ was also an encounter with this call, this vocation.
Wow, okay. So seeing how this all works in your life. Now, this may be an odd question for a priest, right? But a dream job. I know you're ordained as a priest forever, but is there a dream job in your world?
Oh, man. I guess one thing, I'd love to work with college students. So I guess I'm answering this in terms of a dream job within the priest bubble. I would love to be able to work with college students, to run Bible studies, to do a lot of kind of education type classes where we're meeting people, we're building those relationships. And I don't know, I think that would be fulfilling for me. That's something, at least right now, while I'm still 29, that's something that kind of feels like a dream job.
So you mentioned a very important relationship with a seminarian who helped you kind of understand, but what spurred you to this path? Beyond the seminarian, was there anything else that spurred you to this path of the priesthood?
Well, for me it was either being a Christian is worth everything or it's worth nothing. And I was only 14. I was a 14-year-old. You can't say that as clearly as you probably can as a grown-up. But for me, I was like, if this is worth everything, I want to try to give everything. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's kind of like the gamble. You got to just, eventually you got to make a bet. You're in or you're out. And I thought, I want to try this. And if it's what I'm not supposed to do, I trust that won't happen. It's kind of like in the Bible where God calls Abraham to sacrifice his son. And Abraham's like, really? And he's like, oh, okay, I'll do it. But then God stops him because he's like, no, you made your point. We're good. And I was like, well, if God would stop Abraham from sacrificing his son, who's the promised son and the heir of the nations, he'll stop me if I'm supposed to get stopped.
So at 14, you, I guess, kind of say yes to start thinking about the priesthood.
Yeah.
Was there ever any time when you decided, actually, I think I'm going to sell insurance instead?
Yeah. Yeah, lots of times. Lots of times. It turns out, so becoming a priest is like an 8-year ordeal. It's a lot like going to medical school and becoming a doctor. And, 8 years is a long time. It's a very long time, especially for a young person. A lot of people in college think even a bachelor's is, as 4 years is a big commitment, and it is. And the thing is, people change. And a lot of times, the old conventional wisdom was talk about Tiger Woods, and, Tiger Woods stuck to it, and as a 12-year-old, he found his calling, and he just invested, and now he's Tiger Woods. That worked for him. But I don't think that works for a lot of people. Sometimes it's not just that you got to be gritty and double down, but sometimes it's about finding the fit. Grit comes with fit. And there's times when it feels like it doesn't fit. There's times when you get hit on the head or somebody's a jerk or you just realize that you're bad at this or you're not as perfect as you thought you were even. And so there's times when I was I'm packing my bags, going home, everything's good. But it was always meeting a friend or there was a kind of an encounter with somebody that was just no, I need to give it one more day, one more month. And then eventually you kind of find that fit. And it's not just that, I chose it and doubled down, and, bit my teeth real hard and did it. But that fit comes because it's what we're made for. And so when you know that, it's easier to stick to it.
So in a sentence, right? You're a man who studied lots of words in different languages, but in a sentence, what is your call?
My call is to be as much like Jesus as I can be.
That's quality, huh?
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that.
That's hard. So this may be a redundant question then, but do you feel like your role as priest best positions you to fill that call?
I think it best positions me personally to fill that call. One thing that I've been talking to a lot of people about this, about the role of authority in the church, and I think a lot of people tend to make a line that being in authority is the same as being great. Like in the gospel, they talk about who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. We tend to translate that as who has the most authority, who has the most job title in the kingdom of heaven. And man, I tell you, there's people out here, little old ladies, who are much closer to Jesus than I hope, than I could ever hope to be. I think this is what I'm supposed to do, though. It doesn't mean I'm perfect at it. It doesn't mean that every day is sunshine and rainbows and I just wake up and everything's great. But, it's what I'm supposed to do. It's who I am. And if I chose any other road, I wouldn't go to hell or anything. But, that's just not what I was made for.
So, obviously a very personalized call. You be a Christian in 10,000 different ways, but for you it's the priesthood. And you said you had a seminarian who helped you on the path. Was there anyone else who was very influential for you to make this decision and go this way?
My family was always supportive. They always supported me, but it wasn't like I had one of those families who was turbo Catholic, and they were we need one of them to be a priest. My mom and dad are always real supportive, but they also understood when I was having a hard time, and they're like, yeah, man, that's hard. And, it wasn't like, well, you better do it. So I guess my friends in school were some of the biggest supports for me. I'm like one of those low-key introverts. Like, I'm not all the way where I want to sit in my armchair by myself and watch Jeopardy at night. I like to have about 3 friends, no more, no less. So my buddies are always real good. We would talk, we'd hang out and play video games and just kind of figure stuff out. But that little support network, backing each other up and calling each other out sometimes and saying, hey, you're being stupid, that was really helpful. And I probably wouldn't be here without those guys.
Yeah, that's fantastic. The idea of a friendship, and a fellowship. And like you said, it doesn't even have to be like this super Christian group. It's just people who know you, can speak into you. So if a student was watching this or a person was watching you and they said, man, turns out I want to be a priest. How would a person put themselves in that path to be a priest?
Well, first thing you do, talk to a priest. That sounds stupid. It sounds like, oh, you want to be a fireman? Go talk to a fireman. But this is a personal call. We call it vocation. It comes from the Latin word to call, vocare. That just like in the gospel, the disciples don't decide, I'm going to be one of the disciples. Jesus calls each one of them by name. And so I think the best way, if you think that this is the kind of thing for you, is to talk to somebody who's doing it, because it needs to be personal. You can look online and you can look up resources, but there's nothing that really substitutes that human contact. And a lot of times too is sometimes someone who's doing it can really sympathize with what you feel. They say, hey, I feel this and my friends don't get it. Yes, that is normal. And you can look up online, but to hear somebody tell you, you sitting in front of me are normal. That's very helpful. And also to give you some tips, resources, next steps. It's just that human contact is irreplaceable.
Very young as a priest, and talk about saying yes to the call as early as even 14. I suspect there have been some obstacles or bumps on the road. How did you navigate those bumps and obstacles?
Yeah, there's been a lot of those, a whole lot of those. And in fact, it's kind of hard because when you sort of see the Catholic world, when you see the Catholic media world, there's this almost a stereotype that the young priest is very happy, he's on fire, he's got all these energies, and he's doing this stuff. And that hasn't been my life. That hasn't been my life. I've had kind of a very chill first 3 years as a priest. And that was tough. It was tough because the whole 8 years you spend in seminary getting ready for it, you're getting chalked up for, you're going to be needed, and all these people are going to want your time, and you're just going to want to push everybody away so you can have some alone time. And, my first 6 months of priesthood, you might talk to somebody 2 days out of the week at all. So, yeah, that was hard. And I had to adapt. I had to change the way I was living. I had to, nothing drastic. Not like going on a 10-step program or anything, but like just readjusting my expectations. What I thought this was going to be versus what it is. And I'm sure anybody who gets married or who gets a new job has that same kind of thing where you're like, oh man, this thing that I thought I was going to be, yeah, it is that a little bit, but it's also Wednesday afternoon. And I had to pivot. And I think really though that pivot has made me more well-rounded as a priest, more like Jesus, who was a carpenter and had dirty hands and probably smelled bad. So, I kind of think maybe if I'm not as perfect as these guys on TV or as I thought I would be, yeah, that doesn't make me feel great, but maybe it's what's supposed to happen.
Question off the script. Give us a real pro and a real con to the religious vocation.
Yeah. So the biggest pro that I found is you're such a part of everybody's life. And I don't just mean like going to birthday parties and getting invited to weddings and stuff. That's rough. But you're really invited into people's faith life, their inside life, in a way that's different even than like a mental health professional. Because as a mental health professional, you're hearing it and you're talking about habits and thought patterns and you're there to support them. But as a priest, I'm hearing about their relationship with Jesus. As in psychology, they talk about the third and fourth level depth, as deep as it goes. The narrative about yourself and God and the universe and meaning, and that's just cool. A lot of people talk about confessions, and that's definitely one of the more rewarding parts of being a priest. But especially when you start hearing men's confessions, because guys are kind of reluctant to talk about their faith. It's a part of ourselves. Just this is a cultural thing. We don't talk about what goes on inside. But when you get to share that faith moment with another guy, that's really cool. That's a real pro. And you really feel, at least I feel most like Christ in that moment. As far as the cons go, sorry, that's a bad transition, but as far as the cons go, I would say one of the harder parts is you're a friend to everyone and no one. You're such a part of everyone's life that you're a part of nobody's life. So things like a wedding reception, and I'm not just talking about in terms of celibacy, but like a wedding reception could be one of the more lonely times in your life because they want you at the wedding reception, but you're going to be at table 23 with old Aunt Matilda, who's lost her mind and only speaks German. So people want you close, but they also don't want you too close. And sometimes you really feel that. And those days are hard.
Do you feel like the training, you talk about the intense training, as much as the medical doctor, that training prepared you for the lonely days and seasons of ministry of the priesthood?
No. No, I don't. And I don't know that it's anyone's fault. Seminary has to get a wide swath of people. We have guys from like Anchorage, Alaska, and New York City. So it's like, those guys, they have totally different lives. One guy flies a plane to church. The other guy walks across the street to his church. You're like, okay. But no, I don't feel like they did a great job on that. But that's also something that everybody has to figure out on their own. The way somebody handles frustrations and anxiety or loneliness and all that, like, that's nothing to be ashamed of, but it's something you got to figure out. And you got to realize that sometimes you're going to have really healthy ways and new ways and ways that open up all kinds of doors. And also you got to be humble to realize that sometimes the ways that you want to deal with loneliness are not as healthy or not as productive. If somebody has a hard time sleeping at night, yeah, you could just lay in bed longer, but that's going to mess up your day, and you're going to have this real weird life. So I just think that, no, they didn't do a great job getting us ready for that. But I also don't think that that's as giant a catastrophe as it might sound. Because if someone's willing to fight the fight and to get through it, I think it's very rewarding, and you come out that much more polished on the other side.
So in conclusion, as you said one of your dreams is to deal with young people, right? Asking these great existential questions. So a young person comes in, or any person really, and says, Father, I'm struggling to make meaning of my life, find my purpose, find my call, hear my call. What advice would you have to them?
Yeah, that's a big question. That's a really big question. I guess one of the things that I would just say, and I don't say this just because it's my job, I say this more as a Christian, first off, and that's that I think if someone's looking for meaning, yes, you can look for that in work and relationships and even great ideals. I want to serve the poor, or I want to, cure drug addiction. But at the end of the day, all that stuff is just a meaning you chose. To find the meaning that you already have, you have to meet somebody else. And I think the only person who can show you that is God, and particularly the God of Jesus Christ. So I think that someone who's searching for meaning, that's where I want to point them. And not just because that's something that pays my bills, but because I think that that's true, that that's where meaning comes from. And not that people who find meaning in work are wrong. I just think that that doesn't fill the hole forever.